Before we get started on the high poly modeling, I first want to do a little bit of layer organizing. I'm creating a new layer called BP to put the blueprints on, and I'm also creating a new layer which is called blockout, on which I will put all the blockout meshes we created in the previous video. I've set both layers to hidden so I can immediately tell that I've added an object to it. Right now I'm just selecting the blueprint planes and adding them to the BP layer. Setting it to freeze to just check if everything works. And I'm adding the second blueprint plane to the BP layer. Now that I have that done, I want to show you the reference which will show what we are creating. This is the frame for the bulldozer with the transmission at the back, and it's a bit of a triangular shape with some round shapes at the back, and that is what we will be creating. I'm going to select all the blockout meshes, hit Alt-X to set it to X-ray mode, and then create a new layer which is called HB Base. This HB Base layer is the layer we will be using to place all our high poly meshes on. Once that's done, I'm going to create my box here to start our high poly modeling from. This box has a thickness. I just estimated this and I move it into the correct position. And then straight off, I will choose a different color for this mesh. I'm going to be using this color from now on because I think it's easy to work on and I want to keep things a little bit consistent. Then I convert this object to an editable poly and start moving the vertices around. You can see there's a little extruded area at the top. I'm going to have to take that into account later. And I'm also going to be moving the back around a little bit. Now I'll be drawing a cylinder at the rear end because on the reference you could see there was a cylindrical part where the main sprocket axle pops out of the frame. I'm creating this cylinder as a sort of guide for when I'm modeling the cylinder on top of the frame. I'm aligning it with the cylinder that I created in the blockout, moving it into position. And once I have that done, I will start adding some more edges. Now I'm going to be using the graphite tools for that. Specific tool Swift Loop. I think this is really easy for adding some quick loops. You just click and there's a new loop completely around your mesh. Moving that one up because the rear part of the mesh is straight and it's not a slant area anymore. I'm using Swift Loop again to add another loop. I'm going to be adding a few because I want to sort of box in the area where I want the extrude for the cylinder at the back to appear. I'm going to be moving the center vertices more towards the center of that cylinder. And then I'm going to add another loop so that the cylindrical area is nicely boxed in. I select those polygons and perform an inset operation. And I'm doing an inset operation because in high poly modeling, an inset is something I frequently use when I want to create rounded shapes. This sort of looping type of geometry that you create with it, make sure that the rounding of the mesh is perfect when you apply a turbo smooth modifier. Now I'm using a vertex snapping together with move to snap all the points to the exact cylinder that I just created. Now that I've done that, I'm selecting the inner polygons and I'm going to be using the scale tool to get this to a slightly larger scale. Then I use inset to perform an inset on it. And this is what I'll be creating. You can see some bolts and some extrudes. We're going to work on that area to try and get that to look the same. I just selected these polygons. I'm using a grow and scaling the mesh slightly so I can get the scale about right. Once I've done that, I'm using an extrude to add some height to that area. And I'm a little bit bothered by these X-ray parts that are sitting in my way. So I'm just unfreezing the blockout layer, selecting these parts and hiding them. Once that's done, I refreeze the layer and continue my work. I tend to switch around a lot, so now I want to work a little bit on the front here. It's bothering me that this part is supposed to be round, and right now we just have a square shape there. So I'm tweaking the vertices a little bit to create a rounded shape at the center of at the front of my frame. I can go back to the rear now, and what I want to do here at the back is, on the reference, we could also see there were some extra extruded round parts from the frame. I select two polygons for that and perform an extrude on that. You can see this shape looks very sharp. I need to tweak the positions a little bit here so that I can get a nice semi-cylindrical shape in there. It looks very sharp now, but my turbo smooth should take care of the fact that this is supposed to be a rounded area. I've selected these polygons and I want to perform an inset, but I want to perform the inset on the complete side of my mesh. I'm performing an inset here because I want to add some height difference on the side of my frame. And I also want to adjust the height a little bit here because you can see this inset is causing some slight problems with the cylinder, the big cylinder that sits in the center. I'm going to use another Swift loop. Why I'm adding this Swift loop? Well, before I start doing the extrudes with the loop I just added, I want to add some more detail before I start actually doing the extrudes. I have to straighten these vertices, so I select them and use the Make Planar buttons. And also, I talked about that little extruded part at the top. I'm moving the edge to create that from, and then perform a chamfer on there so that I can perform an extrude later. These have to also be moved slightly, performing another chamfer to add some more supporting geometry. Now that I've done that, I also want to fix it up a little bit here. I have to connect these two vertices. Why? Because I actually want to remove these points. I target welded them, move these down, and now you can see I'm actually suggesting the cylindrical shape there. I have to perform one more adjustment. I'm going to add another edge using the Connect tool. Slide them up all the way to the top, and then slide them back down using edge constraints, which you activate by hitting Shift X. Now that I've done that, you can see there's another loop running around the back of that cylindrical shape. I control click my polygon selection, and then I select some additional parts. And with this selection, I perform an extrude, which is the height difference I was talking about. I deselect these inner parts because I want these to sit a little bit lower than the outer rim of the frame. Now that I've done that, I'm going to add some extra loops here, and these extra loops will be used to create this extruded part that I've been talking about before. I perform an extrude with a height of 0, and once I've done that, I manually move this newly created geometry up. The reason for this is my extrude was extruding in the wrong direction. I anticipate this and extrude to 0 and then move manually. It's a nice trick that I sometimes use. Once I have this created, I need to add some extra loops because the front corner of this part is sort of sliced off. It's a slightly slant corner. I'm adding some geometry, moving these vertices, and just tweaking them slightly so I can get the shape right. Move these forward, move this forward as well, and it looks like the shape here is almost right. Then I go back to the back, and at the back, I'm going to perform a few insets and extrudes to add some more height difference in there. I've done an inset and extrude and an extra inset just to harden these edges and add enough support. I think this corner at the back needs to be slightly rounded, so I move these vertices a little bit. And one thing I've noticed also in the reference is that there's another cylindrical shape extruded from the bottom right below that big cylindrical shape. I do the same trick, extrude to 0, move manually. Once I've moved into the correct position, I scale it to start suggesting my round shape over there. One thing, it's at the top, it's rectangular, so I need to manually inset this. Once I've inset this, I'm going to select the top edge, scale it down, and then move it down slightly. And as you can see, a cylindrical shape is starting to appear here. Now I need to fix the fact that the height difference is inconsistent. I delete some polygons, extrude this one, and I'm going to add another extra edge after deleting the inside. This extra edge will make sure that I can fully weld all the vertices without any open geometry problems. The weld button, and that's fixed up. I need to move these around slightly so I can get a nice round shape in there. Then I select these polygons and perform an inset on them. This inset makes sure that my shape will be nicely rounded there. Now I'm creating another reference cylinder, and this reference cylinder will be for the same purpose. I need to snap the vertices to the vertices of the cylinder. 8 sides, but the problem is these 8 sides aren't aligned with my actual geometry. So I'm going to have to rotate this reference cylinder. Rotate it slightly, but it's still not at the correct angle. So I turn it to about 20, which seems right. Then right click the move tool and type in 21, which doesn't seem perfectly correct. So I'm checking the side view just to make sure. And I add 22 there. And that seems to be correct. Now I go back into my editable poly, select the move tool, hit S for snapping, and then snap every vertex to the sides of this reference cylinder that I just created. Now that I've done that, I slightly scale the cylinder up and try to move it into the correct position. I want to have it sit at about the center, so I have to eyeball it a little bit. Then I grow my selection, and now I want to select all those new edges I created. So I'm using a ring selection and then selecting some additional parts. Once I've done that, I perform an inset. And now that I've done that inset, I can add a turbo smooth and check out what my geometry looks like. Most of it looks okay. I have some slight problems over there. It looks way too rounded. I'm going to have to fix that by adding some extra supporting edges. Once again, I will use Swift Loop for that. Swift Loop is really easy for adding supporting edges. Just a single click and immediately you have the edges you need. I need to add them in a few directions. Think about what corners I would like to have sharp and just adding edges next to it. And that looks correct. Also, can't forget the inside of the frame. I'm adding another one there. That looks good. I don't need those reference cylinders anymore, so I just delete those. And this big cylindrical shape at the side, it still looks way too rounded, so I'm going to have to work a little bit more on that. Move it slightly more inside. I'm going to reduce the height a little bit more, slightly scale it, and then perform another extrude on top of that, and a second extrude. The reason I do 2 extrudes is that I can perform a loop selection on this inner loop, chamfer that slightly. Once I've chamfered that, I'm going to select that single edge there, perform a ring selection, make that slightly smaller, and as a final result, I'm going to extrude these inwards along their local normals so I can create this small inset ridge on this cylindrical shape. Add a few supporting edges using the Swift Loop tool, and then I'm back at extruding and insetting this part. I do a few insets. Once I've done that, I'm going to do an extrude on that so that I have my rough geometry layout for this cylindrical part. I need to slightly move this bottom part here. And I'm trying to align it with the blueprint beneath it. It's a little bit hard to see, but it makes sense. I also want to add a cylindrical shape in this extruded part at the top front. The reason for that is it's just an interesting detail, and you can actually see it on the reference. I have this square shape here, and I need to move all the vertices so that they have an approximate round shape. I'm going to add a cylinder here, and the cylinder will be another reference cylinder with 6 sides. And as you can see, I don't have to rotate this one. Making it slightly larger, move it into the actual mesh, scale it down a little bit, and that should be about correct. Now I'm selecting these polygons, scaling them up, and I need to move this loop down because it's interfering with the cylinder at the top. Then I snap each vertex into place and scale it up slightly. Once I've scaled it up, I perform an inset, an extrude with a negative value, and then I perform another inset. Once I've done that, I'm going to attach the cylinder I just created, delete the backside, select the front polygon, and perform an extrude on that. After I've done that extrude, I'm going to perform an inset. Once that inset is done, I do another inset, and then I switch to bevel so I can inset and extrude at the same time. Bevel is a nice tool for that. I extrude a little bit more inwards, and another time. I'm just trying to add some interesting high detail here, and then perform a connect with 2 edges. Connect is sometimes easier than Swift Loop because you can add the same distance on both sides of a ring selection, and that looks pretty good. I'm adding a loop at the front because I thought that was a little bit too rounded. I think that could look better. And here at the side, I want to get the same sort of interesting geometrical detail that I had with those small ridges at the center. So I'm deleting the inside polygons, selecting these, and bridging them. Problem with bridges that you don't have steps in there, so I have to add them with Swift Loop. And I need to delete the inside. As you can see, there are some polygons inside here. I select the center one and hit Grow to select all of them and then delete them. Obviously, this mesh is still open, so I need to weld them. Make sure to reduce my threshold so I don't weld any unwanted vertices. And apparently I've missed a slight gap here, so I'm just going to manually target weld those and move them up so it looks okay. This edge is sitting a little bit too far from the side, so I need to move it over so that's a little bit sharper. I can't forget the inside of the frame. Switching back to the big cylindrical shape at the back. One thing I saw in my reference is that there were a lot of bolts sitting around the cylindrical shape, so I'm modeling a bolt over here. This bolt is a simple model. It's just a 6-sided cylinder that I'm placing in the correct position. Once I have it in the correct position, I'm changing the dimensions a little bit more and converting it to a polygon so I can edit it. I select the back polygon, delete that because you'll never be able to see it. Then select the front polygon and perform an inset on that so that I have some hardened edges. Then I select all the edges around and perform a chamfer on them. And this chamfer is to make sure that this bolt doesn't look round, but that it actually has this 6-sided appearance. I connect all these vertices so that I have nice quads, and then use Swift Loop to add another control edge over there. Once I have these control edges, I'm going to create a copy of this bolt, and this copy will be placed on a new layer called HB Utility. Reason for this is I'm going to be using this bolt model a lot, and I want to keep a copy on a separate layer. Once I have put this on a separate layer, I'm going to move the pivot through the Effect Pivot Only button. I'm trying to align this pivot perfectly to the center of the big extrusion in the middle of my frame. Once I've placed the pivot in the correct position, I think I need to adjust the bolt's position and scale a little bit more. And once that's right, I'm going to use the Array tool with a 360 X degree rotation and a count of about 50. And that looks like it's a little bit too much, so I'm changing that to 40, and that looks right. Change it to instance, hit OK. And I've just created the entire array of bolts, just like you could see on the reference. Once that's done, I go into the attach of the editable poly, and I select all the bolts I just created through the attach list function. Now that all these bolts are attached, I need to model a little bit more detail. In the big extrusion, I'm using the connect tool to place an extra edge. Using the chamfer to create some more, and then using the move tool to move this up slightly to get that beveled appearance. Then I use the Swift Loop and add some more control edges. And I've noticed that these edges don't sit in the correct position with Turbo Smooth on. That's because I don't have so many sides on the low poly version of the big part in the center, so I just scaled those up. Then I add another box model, very simple, putting it on the correct layer, changing the dimensions a little bit, and the purpose of this box model will be to add a little bit of extra detail to the frame model. I delete the inside polygon, then I add some extra edges using the connect tool so that I can get this slightly slant look at the top. Then use Swift Loop to add some more control edges so I don't get a blobbery mess once it's smoothed. And then I will use the attach tool to attach this box to the main frame. Use move to get in the correct position, and then use shift move to create a copy of it. Select both, and I'm just going to copy this small detail all over the place. I've created it once, I better put it to good use and use it a few times. Created about 5 copies of that set of details. Move them in slightly more, that looks better. And now that I've done that, I need to fix a little problem at the top here, at that extrusion. Obviously, as you can see, this edge won't be perfectly hard yet, so I need to add some extra edges there. I'm using a connect then a second connect on the last two edges. And once I've done that, I'm going to use the target weld to weld these over there so that I create perfect quads. There we go, that's all fixed. Checking with Turbo Smooth on, and that looks nice and controlled. Now I need to add some more detail on this round part in the middle. I perform an inset, then do an extrude, perform a few insets. And once these insets are done, I do another extrude inwards, followed by a latest inset, and there we go, we have a nice round shape over there. I'm going to use Swift Loop to add some more geometry at the front, and this extra geometry at the front will serve to create another extrude to add some extra detail to the frame at the front. I extrude these polygons, then going to side view, and in side view I just do some vertex tweaking to get these into a sort of slanted position. This is the sort of thing I'm going for. Then use Swift Loop to add another control edge at the bottom, and just move the position of those vertices so they sit at the same distance from the main part of the frame. Once that's done, I need to add another edge at the back with Swift Loop, so that's a controlled crease there. And then I move the edge at the outside part a little bit as well, so that the edge there will look correct also. Then I select the inside polygons and perform an inset over there. And there we have it, that's the shape I want to create. I do a slight tweaking at the front also, just so that the rounding there looks a little bit better. And once that's done, I'm going to create a cylinder, and the cylinder will serve as the center part of the frame where both halves are connected. I created this cylinder, as you can see here. I need to add a few more sides to it, since 6 is a little bit too few. And then I turn this into an editable poly and delete that edge at the center. I select those vertices, move them out just until the edge of the frame, and then I will use the Swift Loop tool to add a large number of extra edges. And the point of these extra edges is that they control an extrude that I am about to add here. I select these polygons, hit grow, and perform an extrusion by local normal, and apply this twice. And once that's done, I can attach this part to the main frame, and we will see what it looks like with a smoothing. It looks good, but I forgot that one polygon on the side. I select it, delete it, and once that is done, it's time to move on to our final part, which is the gearbox or differential at the back of the bulldozer. I create a cylindrical shape, and this cylindrical shape will be the base of this transmission part of the bulldozer. The hydraulics start from that part. So I change the number of sides, convert it to a polygon, select the backside, move it outwards slightly, then delete it, then select these edges. And once I select these edges, trying to find out the correct number, there we go, I shift move them outside to sort of extrude them, and then move the positions of these edges to create the basic outline for the rest of the transmission. One thing I need to do here is I just made sure that the center of the transmission was perfectly at the 0 point. Doing some vertex tweaking. I cut this in the center, then select half of it and delete it. Now that I have half of this mesh left, I'm just going to keep working on that, tweaking some vertices, and use Shift Move to extrude new geometry. Shift Move these edges outward to also create some more geometry over there. Connect these so that there's a control edge to control the sharpness. Then I will perform an inset over here. And the problem is with this non-symmetrical shape, I need to delete this inner polygon, then select the edge. Once that edge is selected, I hit right mouse button on the spinner and it snaps to the 0 axis. I need to slightly scale this edge up. And once I've done that, I've corrected this shape to look like the symmetrical version. With that made, I can attach this new part to the frame. And I'm just going to add a symmetry modifier here. And then hide my block out so I can see the rest of this part. I still need to finish up the inside. Now a little remark here, this part isn't going to be so visible, so I can get away with not adding so much detail there. Using shift move and then some tweaking to get the new geometry in place. And obviously there's a slight problem here. My number of edges on one side won't connect with the other side. So I'm going to have to create some new geometry. I'm using the cut tool there to add this new geometry. And I need to fix it up on that one side. And I'm just going to do that by hiding part of the geometry and then using the cut tool again. I use cut with snapping by hitting S. Once that is done, I select these two edges and bridge them using the bridge button. Then I shift move these edges outward. I will have to use target weld to weld those two vertices together. Once that's done, I can slightly move that point outward to suggest more of a round shape. I will select these edges, tweak them, and then shift move them outwards to create the final part of this transmission. I shift move this edge outward, snap it to 0, then bridge these parts. Select these polygons, align them to the x-axis, and then I'll have to perform another inset and do the same correction, delete those inner polygons, select the edges, and set them to 0. Using connect tool, I add another control edge, and this part seems almost done. I need to make a few slight adjustments. I think it should be slightly longer, so I'm selecting those verts and moving them outwards. And that seems to be about right. And this part should be moved slightly forward so I can get a round bulge over there. So that's about it for this high poly frame. Looks good, not so much detail, but we don't really need that for such a hidden part.